good afternoon or morning or very late night, wherever you are calling from. And welcome back to the Open Ocean Fall Seminar. I'm Dr. Katie Croft-Bell, Director of the Open Ocean Initiative at the MIT Media Lab. This fall, we are exploring access and equity in ocean science and recreation and considering how those critical components can translate to deep sea exploration. I'm very, very happy to introduce today's speaker, Sheena Talma. She's a conservationist and science program manager at the Nekton Foundation and one of Open Ocean's very own 2018 Ocean Discovery Fellows. A marine biologist from Seychelles, Sheena specializes in fisheries and ichthyology. She has worked for the Ministry of Environment, Climate, and Energy in the Seychelles on environmental sustainability initiatives. Sheena has a passion for generating science within Seychelles and the broader Indian Ocean, and is especially interested in education and awareness-raising programs that will garner a new generation of marine scientists and enthusiasts. Today, Sheena will recount her roles within the organizing teams of the Aldabra Cleanup Project and Nekton Mission First Descent. She'll focus on the expeditions and the science conducted during those programs and why co-production and partnerships are important, especially in the context of large ocean states within Africa. Live from Seychelles, please join me in welcoming Sheena Talma.
Thanks for that introduction, Katie. So for those of you who don't know where the Seychelles is, I will give a brief introduction just so we're both on the same page geographically. But I'll be talking about co-production of science. So something that's really close to my heart, especially living in Africa and in a small island state or a large ocean state. What we do encounter a lot of the time is, countries from with higher economical backgrounds that come in with large opportunities and that sometimes perhaps leave a lot of key collaborators out of this science. So this is something that I've encountered in my daily work and that I've seen at least 3 times this year. So, something that we need to change within our own communities. Really happy to be able to work with organizations and partners that have the same mindset. So a little bit about Seychelles. So the Seychelles is a group of islands or an archipelago, and we have 115 islands. We're based just off the east coast of Africa, between 4 and 10 degrees south of the equator. So we have 2 different types of island groups. We have the Granitic Islands, which are high peaks and mountains, and we have Coraline Islands. So the Coraline Islands are these groups over here, denoted by the red arrows, and these, if you think about them, are very much like the islands of Maldives, very similar in structure. So we like to say that we have the best of both worlds in the fact that we have high peaks, nice hiking areas, and the picturesque white sandy beaches. Now, the Seychelles is made up of a conglomerate of cultures. So we're descendants of Africa, Asia, and Europe because there weren't any inhabitants within the Seychelles. So we're a very young population. We're about 250 years old. So we're very, very young population. So one of perhaps my favorite islands is Aldabra, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site managed by the Seychelles Island Foundation, an NGO based in the Seychelles, working with governments and NGOs to further their work. And the reason Aldabra is special is because it has been afforded protection for over 40 years. So if you look at the map, the inner islands and where most of the population live, which is a population about 95,000 people, we mostly live on one of the main islands called Mahe. Now, Mahe is about 1,500 kilometers away from Aldabra. So Aldabra is closer to Madagascar and the coast of Africa, such as Kenya and Tanzania, than it is to the main island where I live. So it's very far away. And on the island, there are only about 15 people that live there throughout the year. And their tasks, involve ensuring that conservation practices are observed on the island. There is no other protection for the island except for those people that live there. So there's no military base close by. And this area is prone to receiving illegal fishing from the islands and the coast nearby. So Aldabra is special for many reasons. Not only is it protected, it's got the highest population of giant tortoises in the world. There are over 150,000 tortoises on this island. That's more than the population of Seychelles. So that means there's a tortoise for every Seychellois and then some more. It's also vibrant in its marine life. It's got black-tipped reef sharks in 30 centimeters of water. It's got dugongs in the lagoon. It has an abundance of green turtles that come up to nest. And yeah, it's very well known worldwide for its bird life. So it's got one of the biggest populations of nesting frigate birds. And I could go on. It really is for Seychelles and the Indian island states one of the Indian Ocean jewels. But like many other places in the world, especially many isolated islands, it hasn't been, so plastic is still affecting this island. And what is interesting is a lot of this plastic isn't coming from the island. Like I said, there are only 15 people that live there. There's no way that they generate this much waste. And from within the Seychelles Island group, there is also no way that all this rubbish is washed up on the shores just from our islands. So unfortunately for Aldabra and a lot of the outer islands, it is situated in an area where currents seem to accumulate rubbish throughout the year on its shoreline. And again, because it has such a small population, that's primary responsibility is to do turtle monitoring and ensuring that illegal fishing doesn't happen or doing census on tortoises, they can't afford to also clean up the beaches on a daily basis. I also want to keep in mind that this island is quite a big island. So Mahe, the mainland where 95,000 people live, could fit inside the lagoon of this island. So it is a very big space as well. So the effects of plastic has been seen and experienced on this island. Most of these photos, in fact, all of these photos were taken from Aldabra within the last 5 years. And some of these very recent. So the turtle at the top, the loggerhead, and the bird at the bottom were both during the expedition. So these are just some of the effects that we've seen. So SIF, together with partners, decided to launch this project called the Aldabra Cleanup Project. So this was in the mind of the SIF board, the Seychelles Island Foundation board, for a very long time. But it finally came to a point where they could put together this team of individuals that would go out and actually perform this project. So what they did is they launched a call for volunteers, and they asked for a video introduction. And the whole point of the expedition was to clean as much of the rubbish that was being washed up on the shores off the coast. Now, we had 5 main objectives. That was to raise £150,000, to raise awareness locally and internationally, to perform a 5-week expedition. And our aim there was to remove 50 metric tons, to try and reprocess the collected marine debris. So anyone who's worked in plastics or understand plastics at all will know that that is a very difficult task, and to disseminate outputs from the expedition. Now, one of SIF's main partners is Oxford University, and they partnered together to launch the project. And once volunteers were found, which I was one of them, the project was essentially handed over so that we could have ownership over how that expedition looked. So some of the volunteers were from Oxford University and some were from the Seychelles. Now, one thing I didn't explain is the reason this was so competitive is because very few people actually get the opportunity to go to Aldabra. Not only is it far away, because of its protected status, generally only researchers with a very large budget or people who are quite well off and can go on large cruises can go to this island, and only to restricted areas on this island. So we managed to raise more than £150,000. In fact, we surpassed our aim by 148%. And we did this through a range of different money raising schemes, which included raising money locally and internationally. So we managed to get most of our funding from international corporations. We also had Seychelles-based corporations that funded 11%. And what was interesting is we had a crowdfunding page as well, and we managed 7% of that money to come from there, which is really amazing. If people believe in a project and if you sell that project well, generally people will support it. So these are some of our partners and funders. One of our biggest funders locally is the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. If you want to find out more about them, they're actually a very interesting organization which have brought together the debt swap for nature. So essentially trading off protecting areas together with ensuring that conservation practices and money is invested within the country. So a lot of the money that would have gone to paying off our debt instead stayed within the Seychelles and now goes to grants twice a year that people apply for. So a very interesting organization that I recommend you check out. Now, our second aim was to raise awareness locally and internationally. While we are aware that a lot of the debris that is being washed up on the shores of Aldabra is mostly international, this was a great opportunity to work with partners on the ground within our communities to raise awareness. So internationally, our previous president, Mr. Danny Four, went to the G7 in 2018 and raised awareness at their meetings with other leaders there of the problems that small island states face when it comes to plastic. And just an example of how big corporations essentially and our own feeding habits can create worldwide problems. And we also had a lot of media coverage, both locally and internationally. But perhaps my favorite part was actually getting together with local NGOs that are active and always on beaches on the weekends, cleaning up and raising awareness with children and grown-ups about the importance of ensuring that our ecosystem is healthy. And of course, teaching kids about, you know, where plastic is hidden, especially in the products that we consume on a daily basis. Now, our third aim, which was perhaps the most challenging aspect, but also one of the best aspects of the project, was the expedition. Now, a team of 13 of us was based on Aldabra for 5 weeks. And during the 5 weeks, although I said that Aldabra is beautiful and it's got all these endemic species, it does feel like Aldabra wants to kill you sometimes. And the reason being is because it's actually very, very hot, especially during the day. So at around 10:30 a.m., you'll always see tortoises that make their way towards a cave to try and get out of the sun. There's also this very hard volcanic rock on coral rock on the outskirts of the island called karst that if you fall on can actually damage you pretty badly. And of course, one of the most challenging parts was getting all the rubbish off the island and onto a barge, because that meant physically taking each and every gunny bag and loading it onto another boat and then onto another boat. So these were the areas where we cleaned up. So it was mostly the turtle nesting beaches on the south and the southwest coast and the southeast coast of Aldabra. And these were the sites that were taken because they're very important for green turtles during the nesting seasons. So just to show you, because sometimes pictures say a lot more than words. This is just what I was talking about previously. It's a beautiful island. This is just some of the plastic on one of the stretch of beach that we cleaned up. And this is what it was like. This is on a very calm day of collecting rubbish on one of the beaches and loading them onto a barge. Now, the fourth aim was to, of course, get the rubbish that we collected off Aldabra back to Mahe to try and reprocess some of the rubbish that we collected. This is perhaps also a very difficult task. One of the biggest issues, of course, is that once plastic has been out on the ocean, in the hot sun, in salt water, it's very difficult to reprocess it or recycle it. So this is one of our ongoing tasks, especially as part of the Seychelles Island Foundation's mandate. But we have managed to donate some of this to schools and fishermen and also the national marine parks. So they took a lot of the fishing gear that was collected and they're repurposing it within the School for Art project. Whereas the national parks are using the buoys to demarcate some of the marine protected areas. Now, our fifth aim was to work with other organizations and to enable different types of outputs to be created to reach different types of audiences. So we have just published under April Bird's leadership our scientific paper. It's called The Cost of Removing the Unsanctioned Import of Marine Plastic Litter to Small Island States. So you can check that out. It came out a couple of months ago. There's also a very short story called The Song of Aldabra, which is aimed at children. So if you do have any kids, this is actually a really great little story. It's on Facebook, on our Aldabra Cleanup Project page, and it's also on YouTube. And there's also a short documentary called An Island Under Siege on YouTube as well. So you can check that out. So I just wanted to show you, give you a brief overview of what the paper is all about. So this is a visual abstract of our paper. And there were some of the astounding figures that we got from collecting all that rubbish. So essentially, April Burt is doing her PhD on this, collaborating with SIF staff, Oxford, and the Aldabra cleanup volunteers. And one of the figures that astound a lot of people is the fact that we collected over 60,000 individual flip-flops. And although we aimed to collect 50 tons, that proved really difficult. And we ended up collecting 25 tons during the 5 weeks. And one of the surprising figures is that fishing gear was the largest polluter. So that was where the most, that was what made up the biggest quantity of the rubbish collected. So as you can see, once everything was collected, they were put in gunny bags. Everything was weighed and separated. So flip-flops were separated from fishing gear, from pet bottles, etc. On the island before loading onto a large barge and brought back to Mahe, the main island. So although we have cleaned up 25 tons, there is still a lot of plastic rubbish left on Aldabra. This is something that SIF is working with local partners to try and develop an additional plan to see what else can be done. And campaigns within the inner islands continue. One of the biggest challenges there is how do we take this paper that was produced and does prove that it's really difficult for small island states to now deal with this huge problem of plastic pollution, especially when we're not the biggest producers. So how do we get that into policy, not just locally, but also internationally, is one of the challenges that we are facing at the moment. So after the 5 weeks of toiling in the sun and being in an amazing place, I had the second opportunity of getting off one expedition and onto another. Now, the reason there were 2 expeditions happening at the same time, we had the Aldabra Cleanup Project and the Seychelles First Descent, which was run by Nekton and partners, was because the Seychelles has very special weather windows where you can do expeditions, and that's when all of these marine-based activities happen. So yeah, got off that Aldabra cleanup project and went on to the first descent. Again, partnerships was really important in making this happen. So I work for Nekton. I am currently their program manager, and we had mission partners, which essentially ensure that we can go on missions. We had partners that enabled us to have equipment on board. We also had our collaborating partners on the ground that help ensuring that logistics are done and ensuring that the right kind of science is done in a collaborative manner. So Nekton is built on 3 pillars. The first is to conduct research. Second is to create inspirational content, because it's all good to conduct our research, but it is no good if it just stays with us. It has to get out to the people. And one of the biggest and one of the areas that I'm really interested in is knowledge exchange. How do we make these collaborations meaningful and last a lifetime? So this is generally the steps that we go through in engaging partners. Firstly, it's to establish a partnership. So when we approach a country, that might be a year or sometimes 2 years before the expedition is planned, like was the case with Seychelles. And in that, we ask the government whether they would like to partner on a specific expedition to explore below scuba depth. After that, if the partnership with the government is approved, then we start planning together with our local partners. And the planning stage is really important because we want to have as many workshops and meetings with the local partners so that we can understand the needs within that country, because the needs change from location to location. The fun part is, of course, a field operation, which lasts the shortest amount of time. And that generally, in the Seychelles case, happened over 6 weeks. Then we'll have a range of different workshops depending on the needs of the country. In the Seychelles case, they specifically asked for taxonomic workshops and to work on the data together, which of course is a given. And we also had some visiting fellowships and data analysis and results and skills workshop happen throughout the process. And of course, at the very end, we will present results and ensure that the people involved from the very beginning are still engaged at the very end. So at the moment, we're actually running a symposium where a lot of the research that was done on Nekton has been divulged. That happened today, and it continues throughout the week. So if anyone wants to know more about it, you can drop me an email about that. Now, the expedition itself happened on the Ocean Zephyr, and this ship had a lot of equipment. So unlike a lot of perhaps other big expedition NGOs, Nekton is not backed by a millionaire or stable income. How we plan our expeditions is on behalf of the government we work with, which means that once we've established the needs of that country, then we will go out together and find funding. So the kind of equipment included ROVs, submersibles. We also had Nekton nets. We collected data on water chemistry. We also had survey rooms and media rooms to ensure that what was happening on the ship was being transmitted back to the local broadcasting media group, but also internationally. So these are the areas that we went to. So like I said, the Seychelles is just off the coast of Africa. This is Mahe, if you guys remember. This is where I am situated. Aldabra is this one. So this is the Aldabra group over here. And this is some of the middle Coraline Islands. So each number represents a different location, and the order that the islands that we went to the island. So 1 is where we went to first and then came down to Aldabra, etc. So on board, and previously I spoke about the SECAT, the Seychelles Climate and Coastal Adaptation Trust. So Nekton had a special partnership with SECAT, and together they came up with a way to fund individual researchers on the vessel for them to perform their own research that they wanted to as part of what was either needed by themselves or by their organization. So just to run through some of the faces, Dr. Jean Mortimer looked at seagrass and its depth location. So she's a quite well-known scientist who studies turtles in the Seychelles and is originally from the US. We had Jennifer, who looked at sharks within the Aldabra group, Stephanie, who looked at zooplankton, and myself, who's looking at a project to understand the fish and fish eggs that we find throughout our locations that we sampled. So one of the highlights, of course, of being on expedition, being able to go in a submersible. Now, the reason we had the submersibles was to collect biological samples. In this particular area here, there was a manta ray behind us, and we were too busy doing other things that we actually missed the manta ray altogether. It's a sad day for us. So it was to collect biological samples, but we were also doing transects along a transect line. So we had videos mounted on the submersible and the RV, which enabled us to collect video footage of the open water, but also of benthic environment as well. We also had people doing photogrammetry of the reefs, just to add different layers on top of the mission. So, like I said, this is one of the highlights of being on the expedition, was going down in a submersible. And this wasn't kept to only scientists. We also had policymakers that came on board throughout the expedition to go down in the submersible. And I think for me, it is quite an interesting aspect because it takes you down below surface waters where Seychelles would never go otherwise. So to be able to go below 30 meters is quite a feat. And one of the things that really got to me when I went into a submersible, and many of my colleagues that I spoke to, was how that changed from what we're used to seeing, 10 meters all the way down to 300 meters. All this footage is actually from Astove, which is within the Aldabra group. And this was one of our favorite locations, coral-wise, because as you can see, the coral seems extremely healthy. There's no evidence of bleaching, and the fact that they're just growing on top of each other shows a huge amount of competition going on within this area. So this is at 10 meters, and this is at 30 to 60 meters. And you can just see how it changes from very light and busty, and it seems to get a little quieter as we go further down. And I'm sure a lot of you are perhaps used to seeing footage like this. And again, as you go down to 120 meters, this again is all Astove. And of course, to below 200 meters. So for example, I'm not used to seeing many crinoids. So for me, that was really interesting. And once you go down below 200 meters, it just seems like you're on the moon. So that's, I think, as close as I'll get to the moon just a very different type of landscape. So in both projects, I think some very interesting lessons that I learned is the power of collaboration and co-production. So at every step of both of these projects, they were implemented so that ownership was felt by either the country. So Seychelles has ownership over the data, for example, and the aims and objectives of the expedition, and the results that are generated. And that's the same for the Aldabra cleanup project. The aims and objectives were come up together in collaboration, and not, for example, some foreign-based expedition that just comes in and kind of tells or suggests what kind of science would be best done within our own EEZ. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I took out of that, and the commitment that comes when people feel included in projects. So if you want to learn more about what we did, you can follow Nekton and the Aldabra Cleanup Project. We are also holding a Seychelles Ocean Symposium, which is in collaboration with Nekton, Seychelles Island Foundation, SECAT, Ministry of Environment, and a whole bunch of other organizations that are Seychelles and foreign-based, from today all the way till Friday. So you can just drop me an email or visit the SECAT and Nekton pages, and you can sign up for that. And there are quite a few publications that are being worked on in collaboration that will come out at the end of this year and next year on some of the new discoveries that were found during this expedition.